Great. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us this morning or this evening, depending on where you are, for a webinar hosted by Right to Freedom on Bangladesh, the Way Forward. I realize there's a lot of interest in Bangladesh these days, which is a great thing. But what it means is that many of you have multiple demands on your time. That goes especially for our panelists, but also for the attendees. So I want to thank everyone for making the time to join us today for our first webinar, or our first activity is Right to Freedom, since the August 5th change in government in Bangladesh. Just a couple of ground rules to start. We're using the webinar format. So if you are a participant and you have a question, please use the Q&A function. At the second part of the program, we'll be asking our panelists to respond to your questions. I will hand the mic over now to our Executive Director, Mushfiqul Fazal Ansarey, who will introduce our lineup for today. Mushfiq, over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for joining our webinar on Bangladesh, the Way Forward, which marks our first public event following the fall of the Sheikh Hasina regime. Let me introduce our esteemed panel speakers. Dr. Fahmida Khatun. Dr. Fahmida is the Executive Director at the Center for Policy Dialogue, CPD, a civil society think tank in Bangladesh. She's also non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Dr. Fahmida completed her postdoctoral research at Columbia University and undertook joint research with Professor Jeffrey Sachs. She holds master's and PhD economics from the University College London, UCL, University of London, and has participated in the leadership decision-making program at Harvard University. Dr. Fahmida regularly serves on various policy-making and advisory bodies, both in Bangladesh and internationally. Next, we have Dr. Badiul Mazumdar, who wears many hats as an economist, development, policy expert, and political analyst. His major contribution in the areas local government and electoral reforms. Dr. Mazumdar is a leading voice in governance reforms in Bangladesh. He is also Vice President and Country Director of the Hunger Project and the Founder Secretary of the Civil Society Organization Citizen for Good Governance, Shojan. A prolific author, Dr. Mazumdar's most notable books on the repealing the caretaker government of Bangladesh. Mr. Michael Kugelman is the director of the Wilson Center South Asia Institute. He is also a columnist for Foreign Policy magazine, where he writes the South Asia Brief since 2007. He has managed the South Asia portfolio at the Wilson Center, leading the center programming and research on the region. His primary areas of expertise include Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, and US relation with each of them. His recent projects focus on shifting geopolitics in South Asia, US-India technology cooperation, the future US-Pakistan relation, and the role of strategy during the US-led war in Afghanistan. Mr. Kugelman was published op-eds and commentaries in the New York Times, Foreign Affairs, Politico, CNN, Al Jazeera, and including Bangladesh and the outlets from Bangladesh and the region. And our President William B. Milam, Right to Freedom President, as you know, the Washington-based nonprofit rights organization. He's leading our organization from the beginning. And he's also a senior scholar at the Wilson Center and also editor of South Asia Perspectives, a Washington-based magazine focusing on South Asia. He also writes for the Friday Times. Before the joining Wilson Center, he was a career diplomat with the post before retirement, being U.S. ambassador to Pakistan, with served from August 1998 to July 2001. He was also U.S. ambassador to Bangladesh from August 1990 to October 1993, from September 1985 he was the Assistant Secretary of State for International Finance and Development, and he is representing Right to Freedom as president. And lastly, our moderator, John Danilowicz is a retired Department of State Foreign Service officer with extensive experience in South Asia. Throughout his career, John provided leadership at some of the most dangerous and challenging diplomatic posts. His career highlights include the serving as Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassy in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and Juba, South Sudan, and as the Principal Officer at the US Consulate General in Peshawar, Pakistan. Earlier his career, John managed multi-million-dollar law enforcement and justice sector assistant program, Pakistan and Panama. He twice served as a faculty member at the US Naval War College, teaching in its strategy and policy development. John also served as a diplomat in residence in New England, and he's also serving as editor at large at the South Asia Perspectives. John, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mushfiq, and thank you for your work, not only as Executive Director of Right to Freedom, but also your courageous work as a journalist over these past years, helping to keep Bangladesh on the radar screen of policymakers in Washington, New York, and around the world. So we're very happy to have you with us here at Right to Freedom. As you may have noticed, Professor Ali Riaz was not able to join us today. Ali had a short notice visit to Bangladesh, and his schedule got away from him. So he sends his regrets, but I'm sure we'll be able to welcome Ali in a future Right to Freedom event and benefit from his experiences learned on the ground during his visit. So with that, I will hand it over to Ambassador Milam, who will give us some words of welcome and set our proceedings in motion. So Bill, over to you.
Well, thank you, John. It's my pleasure to welcome you, all you who are here, to this webinar, which I'm very happy to participate in. I would like to open the session by talking a little history. That's because I'm old and I've seen a lot of it. If you listen carefully to Mushfiq, you realized, for example, that I was in Dhaka not the last time, but the time before last, that the same thing happened as happened on January 5th. On January 5th of this year, when I was trying to keep track of events in Dhaka, I kept saying to myself, I've seen this movie before. And that's not to be humorous, actually. It's not humorous because what it means is that 3 times, not twice, but 3 times in the last 35 years, Bangladesh has actually had to start over again. Here we are back to almost to square one, in a sense. You have to put your government together and put your society back together again, and that ain't fun, I think. But it's a very, very important thing that's going on, and I think I'm very happy to be here today to hear these speakers, all of whom I know very well and respect very highly. But I want you to I think everybody who thinks about Bangladesh should think about the history of Bangladesh, which has been through 3 different periods when it has to renew itself. And my phone is ringing. I'm sorry about that. It's probably my sister-in-law. Anyway, I'll then turn it back to John, but I'm very much looking forward to our speakers and to your questions and answers and your questions after they speak. Thank you, John.
Great, thanks, Bill. And we'll come back to you as well when we kick off our Q&A session. So without further ado, now we'll turn to Dhaka and Dr. Badiul Mazumdar, who can give us the perspective from the ground of the way forward, particularly the road to elections. Badiul, over to you.
Thank you, John, and thanks everybody. And I thank Right to Grow, Right to Freedom for inviting me to this webinar. And it's an honor and privilege to participate in this webinar with some of the really distinguished guests. And yeah, thank you. Well, we had, as Bill said, we had a mass upsurge on January 5, and this was not the first time we had mass upsurge of some proportion in the past. And this was perhaps one of the biggest we have witnessed in the history of Bangladesh. And this mass upsurge under the leadership of young people, and where the vast number of citizens participated, toppled Hasina government, and Hasina and her sister fled to India. And this was a monumental change, and some people want to call it a rebellion. And this creates opportunities, state opportunities. But we do want to, we must not forget that we had opportunities before, as Bill said, once in 1971 when Bangladesh was created, and that time at least a second time in 1990 when the major political parties came together and waged a movement against strongman Irshad and restored Irshad, and we are supposed to have a new beginning, another new beginning. And unfortunately, the promises that mass upsurge and the commitment of the political leaders made remain unfulfilled. So, in that backdrop, we are into this third mass upsurge, which is, I would consider it to be the biggest of all. And it was so big that the people from all walks of life, not only young people, but rich, poor, men, women, the people from the villages, people from the urban areas, middle class, upper class even participated. So it was truly a mass upsurge of mass of all distinctions. And so what message did this mass upsurge convey to us? One of the messages it conveyed to us that the people who committed the crimes, in fact, Hasina regime created a criminal empire she created, and those people who committed those crimes must be punished. And at the same time, another demand was that never ever again, this should be repeated. In other words, Hasina and her cronies must not return to repeat the same things that they did before August 5. Let me shed some light on the criminal acts these people perpetrated. One of the things that they committed crime against humanity. They killed 700, 800, 900, and some people speculate that it would be more than 1,000 people. Nobody exactly know. And this was killing of innocent people, and even bystanders were killed. Young people, children were killed. Elderly people were killed. People from all age group were killed, and from all walks of life too. And because people from all walks of life participated in this mass upsurge, and so this was one crime. The second crime is this: they carried out a lot of criminal acts over the last 15 years. The killing in the last 15 years, not this mass killing, but also the lot of violence and arrests and extrajudicial killing, forced disappearance, Ainagor, and all these unthinkable things they did. So those are crimes, serious criminal acts. Those must be punished too. The other is financial crimes, the looting, plundering, and stealing, and then taking money abroad. And these are serious crimes, and billions and billions of dollars are taken away, and those people should be punished too. So one of the most important demands was punishing those criminals. The other demand is repair the state. In fact, this is a term that was used by the youngsters during the road safety movement. And these people who led this movement are basically, they were the ones who also led that earlier movement. They were school kids. Now they are university kids. And so if we are to prevent the repetition of what happened past, we need to do in a distinct way 3 things. One is the reorganize the institutions that have broken. They have crumbled. In fact, Hasina, say for example, police force was her personal basically force, and catered to her and her party interests and her personal interests, and they were not the state institutions. So as she left, this institutions crumbled, and the bureaucracy is also in bad shape, and many of them fled. And so those people who committed crime here, first thing they need to do is to bring them to justice and punish them. And secondly, these institutions need to be rebuilt and make them functional, so that without these, we cannot. This interim government that took over would not be able to function. And the third thing is that major reforms that needs to happen. And now, what kind of reforms that will happen will depend on how far we want to go. Say, for example, do we want to go as far as Kumilla, taking the example of Bangladesh, or we want to go to Chittagong? In other words, how deep do they want to go in terms of reforms? Some people say that we had a rebellion, and so constitutions and everything else have become redundant, and they are no longer operative, and so we can start afresh. We can start with a clean slate. The other school of thought is that we have a constitution. This government took oath under the constitution, although not quite constitutional, is somehow haphazard. And so the constitution we have, we could amend that constitution and make it functional, and thereby and some deep reforms, and thereby we could prevent the repetition of the return of the old regime. And so at the same time, we'll also have to amend some of the laws, and we'll have to the institutions, we'll have to make those functional. Many of those institutions are captured, and in addition to the law enforcement agencies and bureaucracies, and all the constitutional institutions and the statutory institutions are in bad shape, so they will have to be made functional, and procedures and the way they function, they will have to be redefined and reformed, so that they function effectively and not in the interest. They function in the interest of the people. Now, if we want to change everything, if we want to start with a clean slate, some of the people, such as Ali Diaz, just recently said that we need to rewrite the constitution. If that is the case, then it will take longer, and it will be more complicated, and it won't be easy. And so then we should have a constitutional drafting committee, and which could draft a constitution, and then we have an election. And through this election, we can form a constituent assembly, and then we can place the draft, and there will be debates, and based on debate, there will be a new constitution, and so that will be starting from clean slate. And also there are laws that need to be amended and changed, and the institutions will have to be made functional by letting some of the people go. For example, reconstituting the election commission, and judges. Some of the judges already resigned, and the other judges who had whose there are serious questions about their the qualifications and background, whether their background is appropriate. Those people will have to be scrutinized and take actions. So similarly, all institutions, those things will have to happen. And so this is if we want to make drastic changes, and first of all, the government will have to declare that this is a revolutionary government. So everything is no longer in the past. What the legal framework and everything we have are not relevant. So they start afresh. The other alternative is to work with the present constitution and make changes, make important changes. For example, bringing some sort of balance between the power of the president and the prime minister, and the set a term limit of the people running for office, and especially the prime minister, and also the decision about whether the person who becomes the head of the government should become also head of the party. Those are some of the decisions we'll have to make, and also whether or not we'll have a upper house. We are unicameral, and whether or not we should have an upper house, and in addition, the representational system we have now passed the post. So there are strong demands about including the proportional system or a mixed system. So those are some of the things that we'll have to consider and incorporate in the constitution. Some of these will require amending, and some of these will have to include afresh. And also Article 70, which prevents the floor crossing. And so those are some of these things that we'll have to really consider and reform and include in the constitution. How do we include in the constitution? There are alternative ways of doing it. One of the ways, I say, the 15th Amendment, which took away the what is it called, the referendum.
The caretaker, yeah.
Referendum provision, and also did away with the caretaker system. And yours truly and few of us went to the court and challenged that amendment, and hopefully we'll get the government. We hope that the court will find for us and declare the 15th Amendment unconstitutional. And there are good reasons and for declaring it unconstitutional, because this was enacted in an unconstitutional way. I wrote a small book, Mushfiq talked about it, and so there are ample reasons why it should be declared unconstitutional. So that opens doors. For example, referendum provision. We could use the referendum provision to get people's support for individual the package of constitutional reform we are talking about. So through referendum provision, we could get those incorporated in the Constitution. But once the 15th Amendment is declared unconstitutional. And also we went to the appellate division to review the 13th Amendment, which basically the judgment of the 13th Amendment, which declared the 13th Amendment unconstitutional. So if we get the judgment in our favor, then this will open opportunities for this present government, interim government, to incorporate many of these reforms into the constitution, which is harder. In terms of reforms of the laws, the government could do it through ordinances by the president, although those ordinances would have to be ratified by the parliament in its first session. Another alternative would be just one second. আমি আপনাকে একটু পরে ফোন করি বুঝছেন, একটু পরে ফোন করব। Sorry, one of the advisors called me, and this is a privilege for an advisor to call, to receive a call from the advisor. Okay. So the other alternative is that the government to spell out what they want to do, and at least their vision, what kind of reform. As I said, the two alternatives: either start afresh or reform and amend the present constitution. And if they want to take the second route, they can use the as I said, the referendum provision. Or other thing they can do is they could have their own reform agenda, the government's reform agenda. First, they will have to come to a reform agenda, and then the dialogue with the political parties, and come to an agreement with them, and sign what we call an agreement, and national charter, we could call it. And we have drafted something like that, national charter, that the political parties and the present government, the interim government, will come to an agreement, and they will agree, and they will sign a document. And after that agreement, there will be election, and obviously election commission will have to be reconstituted, and electoral laws will have to be amended, and those could be put into effect through ordinances, as I said. And then once the
sorry, Badiul, just interrupt. If you could just wrap up in the next couple of minutes, that'd be great. Thanks.
I'm almost done. So once they agree, there is a signed document, that the national charter, and the government, the party which will come to power through election, free and fair election, they will be obligated to implement those reforms. And hopefully they will do that, although we do not have a good track record. You may recall that in 2008, before the 9th parliament election, Awami League had a election manifesto called Charter for Change. They are going to change everything. And in fact, they changed everything from day to night rather than night to day. And so they do not have a good track record. So there will have to be some ways of guaranteeing and watching. So student could probably play that role, and who has brought us to this position. So they could guarantee, they could stand guard, and so that the politicians keep their words. And that may be the other way. So I'm done with my presentation, and so these two ways we could go that could lead to a free and fair election, hopefully a better future, a new future, new Bangladesh. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Badiul. You've laid out a very ambitious set of reform proposals, but I've never seen you so energized. So I take that as a positive sign.
Sure.
We have several questions that have come in, so please keep the questions coming. Again, you have the option to put in the question anonymously, or feel free to identify yourself and if you want your organization. I'll now turn to Michael Kugelman, who will provide us some perspective on the international dimensions of the way forward for Bangladesh. So over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you to Ambassador Milam and to Mushfiq and others at Right to Freedom. Thank you for including me in this very important discussion. Foreign policy will not, I don't think it will not be the uppermost priority for the interim government in the next few weeks. The biggest priorities will be issues of law and order, economic stabilization, and reform, among other things. That's not to say that there are not urgent foreign policy priorities right now. There are, and in particular, the relationship with India, which I'll talk about in a bit, especially because of the fact that Sheikh Hasina is still in India more than 4 weeks after she was ousted, or almost 4 weeks. And also the situation in Myanmar, the war there, as I think we all know, has really intensified in a big way in recent months, and we're starting to see growing spillover effects in Bangladesh. So I think that's an urgent priority as well, or should be. But be this all as it may, I think it's very important to talk about how the interim government in Bangladesh should approach its international relations. My first point here is that the government, as I see it, has both advantages and disadvantages as it approaches its foreign policy. In terms of the advantages, what it has in its favor, the Yunus factor, I think, is something that we really need to underscore here. He is a star abroad. He's a household name. He's deeply respected, and he really will not have to work very hard at all to get the world's attention or the world's respect. Also, Bangladesh is a significant global economic player, and as a non-aligned state, a geostrategically important country in an era of great power competition. And this means that much of the world will want to engage with the interim government. Now, what the interim government does not have in its favor, disadvantages with foreign policy, or should I say challenges, there really is very little experience with governance within this interim government, and that includes Dr. Yunus himself. And the interim government advisor charged with foreign policy, he's a retired diplomat. He's a respected retired diplomat, but he is, at the end of the day, a retired diplomat. Also, the fact that you still have a significant degree of political uncertainty in Bangladesh right now, this is something that that has made and will continue to make a number of world leaders and capitals a bit nervous. And also the law and order situation, which may be more stable now than it was several weeks ago, but remains tenuous. This is something that will have impacts on global investors, among others, in terms of how they perceive Bangladesh right now. So with that said, what should the interim government do on foreign policy in the coming weeks and the coming months? Above all, I think it would be very useful to reach out to and reassert the importance of its ties with Bangladesh's ties with its wide range of commercial economic partners. Bangladesh is a country that has a significant role in the global economy, so it has a very wide range of partners across the board. This includes sponsors of infrastructure projects in Bangladesh, like China and Japan. It includes key trade partners like the EU and, of course, the US. And it includes energy suppliers in the Middle East, among other things. And I think that this is especially important diplomatic outreach now, given that the economic situation in Bangladesh is quite precarious. So I think it's essential to ensure that relations with Bangladesh's economic partners remain robust. But these partners do have some concerns now. Bangladesh, for example, I think will need to show in very concrete ways that it is taking the right steps on restoring law and order and security. And that appears to be going well for the most part, but there clearly are still a number of challenges remaining on that front. I also think that when it comes to Dhaka's interlocutors in the West, it is very important to underscore Bangladesh's commitment to rights and democracy. Bangladesh has many important trade partners in the West. It will not want to let concerns about rights and democracy deleteriously impact its relations with the West, as was the case during the Hasina era. Dr. Yunus, with his reputation in the West as a fervent supporter of democracy, I think can be an asset in this regard. But Bangladesh's government, I think, will really need to walk the talk, so to speak, and show that it is truly committed to restoring democracy and human rights. And speaking of Dr. Yunus, he will have a big opportunity very soon in the next few weeks at the UNGA meetings, which I understand he will be attending, or he likely will attend. And if he does, he would be speaking in New York on the biggest global platform since he took over the role of advisor leading the interim government. So, assuming he's there in New York speaking at the UNGA, what should he do? What should he say? There's several things that he could do, several things that he could say. I think that above all, he should lay out a vision for governance, the goals of the interim government, his plans for reforms, his efforts to push for the restoration of democracy, and so on and so forth. I think it would also be very useful for him to speak about his government's economic plans and including what areas specifically the international community can be helpful in strengthening, stabilizing Bangladesh's economy. And I also think that his platform at the UNGA would give him an opportunity to weigh in on what is arguably Bangladesh's biggest humanitarian challenge, and that being the Rohingya refugee issue. I think that it would be useful for him to make a pitch for international assistance or more international assistance for Rohingya refugees, which it would be an especially important pitch for two reasons. One, as I noted before, the war in Myanmar is intensifying in a big way, and we've seen in recent weeks fresh inflows of Rohingya refugees coming into Bangladesh. Second reason why this would be an important pitch to make is that donor attention, international donor attention, has been drawn elsewhere due to the wars in Gaza and Ukraine, among other places. And so I think there is a risk that the Rohingya crisis, which has received significant levels of international attention and donor support in recent years, but there still is a risk that it could be overlooked. So I think that at the UNGA there would be a really good opportunity for Dr. Yunus to reorient attention around that challenge. And I'll start to wrap up with a few words about India. I think we have to talk about India in any conversation about what Bangladesh's foreign policy approach would be. It's perhaps Bangladesh's most complex foreign relationship right now. It's one of the only countries, and certainly its only close friend, that has not rushed to embrace or at least welcome the new government. There had been a brief engagement, a call, I believe, between Dr. Yunus and Narendra Modi. But that's pretty much it. And as I understand it, not much really was said in that call. Bangladesh, I think, has an opportunity to assert, or should I say, reassert its agency vis-a-vis India. What do I mean by that? Well, it has there's a fresh slate at play here. And it can commit to not letting India influence its foreign policy decisions. It can commit to not letting India undermine its strategic autonomy. It can commit to not letting the independence of its foreign policy, or its domestic policies for that matter, be undermined by India. But I think that we need to be very clear, at least in my view, is that Bangladesh cannot afford to lose India, so to speak. It needs that partnership for reasons of trade, for reasons of border security, for reasons of geopolitics. I think it really needs to maintain workable relations with India, not necessarily super warm relations, but workable relations. Just like, quite frankly, I think India's own interests dictate a workable relationship with Bangladesh moving forward in this post-Hasina era. And in that regard, I would make three suggestions to the interim government. First, do engage with New Delhi, or at least try. Dr. Yunus will likely have an opportunity to meet with Modi during the UNGA meetings, assuming they're both there, and I assume they both will be there. He should avail of that opportunity. Second, there are some steps that Dhaka can take that would advance its own interests, particularly its security interests, but would also address some of India's concerns. And these steps can include Dr. Yunus and others in the interim government meeting regularly with leaders of religious minority communities in Bangladesh to ensure that concerns about security are being addressed. And in fact, these meetings have already been happening. Dr. Yunus has met with leaders of the Hindu community, for example. These steps could also include easing up on destabilizing retributive politics that target peaceful, innocent Bangladeshis that happen to have been supporters of the Awami League, of the previous Awami League-led government. Third, don't unthinkingly succumb to the temptations of populism. There is, as we all know, extensive levels of anti-India sentiment in Bangladesh. One can understand why. That very recently, again, as we all know, recently fueled speculation that India opened up a dam that helped precipitate the recent floods in Bangladesh. And Nahid Islam, one of the top student protest leaders and now a member of the interim government, holding a minister status or the equivalent of it, he repeated those allegations, even though there's no indications that that actually is true. But because of that anti-India sentiment among the public in Bangladesh, this interim government will need to be very careful about how it pursues its relations with New Delhi. I mean, it's going to need to take care not to do anything that could further inflame that anti-India sentiment. And this is why I think it should combine its outreach to India with a principled stand against any attempts by India to meddle or try to meddle or exert outsized influence. To conclude, final word, I would observe that Bangladesh's domestic situation and its domestic policy priorities are very much linked to its foreign policy right now. I mentioned earlier how the law and order situation and political uncertainty in Bangladesh could impact the perceptions and potentially the actions of foreign governments and foreign investors vis-a-vis Bangladesh. Even something as seemingly distinct as labor rights in Bangladesh has direct tie-ins to its diplomatic relations and broader foreign policy. Because of Bangladesh's poor labor rights situation, it misses out on a major investment opportunity coming from the US. And that's because the US International Development Finance Corporation, the DFC, the main US government sponsor of infrastructure assistance in the Indo-Pacific, is not allowed, it's not authorized to invest in Bangladesh because of its labor rights situation. Strengthening its labor rights can bolster its prospects for more investment from the US and from Europe as well. So with that, I'll end there and back to you, John. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Michael. That was a fantastic overview of the international dimension of Bangladesh interim government's way forward. I'm now going to shift gears a little bit. Dr. Fahmida Khatun is joining us by phone after a long trip across the world to come to the United States. So I thank her for joining us. She's provided us a video, which I'm going to play now, but Dr. Khatun will be available for the Q&A section. So if you just hold on 1 second, let me set that up.
I would like to focus on the economy where I feel comfortable. So we have observed how the political turmoil in Bangladesh during the student-led mass uprising in July and August led to the collapse of the government on 5th of August, 2024. So with this change, the interim government has to work on almost every front to fulfill the ambition of the students and people of the country, which was an anti-discriminatory society. This is extremely challenging as the system has almost collapsed during the last 15 years. Talking of economics, the challenges on the economic front are formidable. Some of these challenges include high inflation, dwindling foreign exchange reserves, inefficiency and corruption in public projects implementation, low tax GDP ratio, low private and foreign investment, a weak financial sector, high non-performing loans in the banking sector, illicit financial outflow, unemployment, and also poverty and inequality. So these challenges are very difficult to deal within a limited time. I just want to touch upon the pattern of economic growth in the country during the past decades or so, very briefly. The economy observed a reasonable rate of growth, even if we discount the growth numbers claimed by the previous government, because we have always discussed about the authenticity and integrity of data. And there was a lack of authenticity of data during the past regime because the numbers were inflated as those were far from reality. So in any case, even if the growth rate was 5 to 6%, the benefits of that growth were not distributed equally among the citizens of the country. I have written earlier that Bangladesh's growth story lacks justice and humanity. And this I described from the point of the distributional aspect of the growth and the qualitative part of the growth. And that is why the student movement for quota reform was the manifestation of bigger problems that policymakers had overlooked for decades. And the demand for quota reform was just the tip of the iceberg of the larger problem that the earlier government failed to recognize. In fact, behind the quota movement was the suppressed anger and deprivation of people which existed for a long time in various forms. And that is why the quota reform movement had transformed into an anti-discrimination movement, and it was participated by people from all walks of life. I'll just mention two issues which reflect the discrimination in the society, which has been existent for several decades. First, I will deal with the issue of employment generation, which was the core reason for the quota reform movement by the students. So we have observed that despite reasonable amount of economic growth during the past 1.5 decades, the economy was not able to generate adequate employment for the young population. Every year, about 2 million people enter the labor market in the country, but the scope for employment generation is very limited. One of the reasons for that is the private investment has been stagnant for over a decade or so. The private investment has been hovering about 23 to 24% of the gross domestic product of the economy. And that is why it has limited capacity to create employment for the people who enter the labor market every year. And the public sector, that is why it became the only reliable source for employment, which has been expanded, but that not that much also. So in the public sector, there are increases in salaries, there are opportunities for perks, job security, power. So that is why the government jobs became the most coveted job in the labor market. However, the public sector jobs were reserved for certain sectors. In fact, over 50% of the jobs in the public sector had been reserved for certain groups. That is why the job market in the public sector became also very squeezed for the students, common students who were graduating from the universities and colleges. In fact, if you look at the numbers again, the official unemployment rate is 3.53% according to the Labor Force Survey of Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, which is a huge underestimation because they also show that youth unemployment rate is 8%. But the fact is that the youth who are aged between 15 and 24 years, who are not in employment, education, and training, that is NEET, that is 40.6%, in fact, which is very high because these are the youth who are not engaged in any form in the society. So clearly, Bangladesh's economic growth could not create enough jobs. And whatever jobs were created, most of them were actually in the informal sector. About 85% of the total jobs were in the informal sector, where income and job security are very low. So the second issue I would reflect on regarding the discrimination part is the growing inequality in Bangladesh. We have observed that while the economy was growing, inequality was growing as well. The official statistics again has shown that this is the 2022 data of the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics that shows that the top 5% of the population possessed about 30% of the national income, whereas the bottom 5% owned only 0.37% of the national income. And it has increased compared to 2016 data by the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. So first of all, the interim government has to ensure political stability and also restore law and order situation, because these are preconditions for economic prosperity and economic growth. The political turmoil which we have observed during the student-led movement, and also some of the actions by the previous government, for example, internet blackout, all these have an impact on the economy in the immediate term, and also it will have an impact in the medium term. In fact, the economy now requires reforms. There is a need for institutional reforms for bringing discipline in the economic system and also bring back the discipline in the economy, because we have observed due to the systematic weakening of the economic institutions, the macroeconomic stability which we have observed over the years, that has been weakened. And this is because all the economic indicators which I have mentioned earlier, those are now on a downward trend. And we have observed that the institutions have been systematically weakened because the policymakers did not show much enthusiasm for improving the governance. But as we all know that without good governance, the inclusive and sustained economic growth is not possible. And this was the core demand of the student-led movement, that to have an equitable society which will be inclusive. But we have seen that the institutions over the years have become extractive in nature, because there has been a nexus of various players, the political elites, corrupt political elites, the civil bureaucracy, the military bureaucracy, the privileged group of the private sector, law enforcing agencies. They all have become part of the system which were engaged in extracting public resources. So the challenges for the interim government are humongous. The corruption model which have been created over the years, over the decades, have benefited certain groups which I have mentioned by depriving the larger sections of the people. So on the whole, the list for the interim government for immediate and midterm measures are long, but some of the measures will have to start during the interim government, which should be carried out in the next government also, when the new elected government will come. But the initiatives have to be taken now, and this is the time. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you to Fahmida, and hopefully you can hear us and be able to participate in the Q&A section. So we've just about reached the hour mark, which was our initial goal for the session. But given the amount of interest and the number of questions, I'm going to beg indulgence from our panelists. So if Michael, Badiul, Fahmida, if you can stick around for a little bit, we'll try to do 15 minutes or so of questions and answers. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yes. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Fahmida, and thanks for joining us. And I hope the jet lag doesn't hit you too soon. But that was very, very helpful. Thank you. So Bill, as predicted it, or as promised at the beginning, I'll give you the first shot of asking a question for any of our panelists if their presentations provoked any questions on your side. So over to you.
I have two questions, actually. One for Badiul and one for Michael, both of whom are my close friends, so I'm going to make these easy questions. And for Badiul, you sort of said during your presentation that there was a long-term and a short-term way of recovering Bangladesh, the interim government going about reforming and recovering and getting Bangladesh back into sort of the normal functions of life. And I'm wondering if I have which one you would think would be better, the short term or the long term. I mean, the short term sort of leaves a lot of things undone, which leads me to think that if you have had a short term approach, you would have to have something like the caretaker amendment already in place to keep things more or less on an even keel, or would you think that a longer term effort is advisable, which might last 2 to 3, 4 years? I don't know how long you think it would take, but so that's my question for you. I'll wait and ask Michael's question after Badiul.
Okay, thank you. Well, what I think, what my views are less important than the views of our the interim government, because they will have to come up with a vision and a work plan of how they are going to get there. And in fact, if they want to start with a clean slate for longer term and really starting it fresh, then time is running out. So they will have to make the declaration very soon. And the impression I get is that they are not going to go for juggling, and they are going to go for amending the constitution. That's the purely impression. I can be certain. And so in that case, our challenging the 15th Amendment and also asking for the review of the 13th Amendment judgment will help, will create opportunities. It would be better if we could declare that this was a revolution and everything has become redundant and we start afresh. But that's not what they have done. They have taken oath under the Constitution, although they had to go to the court and send a reference for court's permission. But still, nevertheless, they are following, although not closely, the Constitution. So that gives me the impression that they want to amend the Constitution rather than going for a new one.
Okay, thank you. Michael, you talked about relationships with India. I was wondering, this is kind of a funny little question, I guess, but it doesn't look like Sheikh Hasina is going anywhere very soon, and she's stuck in India. And how does her presence in India affect the effort of the Bangladesh interim government to put relations on the kind of even keel you'd like to see?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I think there was another question in the chat box about that too. So happy to address that. I really think that the longer she stays in India, the more difficult it will be for this relationship to get off the ground, so to speak, in the post-Hasina era. But that brings up a more complicated question that I don't really have an answer for, as to what exactly does India intend to do with the continued, what does it plan to do about the continued presence of Sheikh Hasina in the country? And there are a number of commentators in India that have indicated that India does not turn on its friends, and that it will be willing to host her as long as it takes. But I'm not sure about that. I think that the government in India is pragmatic in the sense that it will want to try to make the relationship work somehow, even though there's a lot of concern in India about how things are looking in Bangladesh now. But I think that would entail helping Sheikh Hasina find some place that would be willing to take her in, and who knows if that'll happen, or if so, how long it will take. India and Bangladesh do have an extradition treaty. And I think one question here is, would the interim government in Bangladesh consider making a formal request to extradite her? I'm not sure if they would go that far, but if they do, that I think would put India in a pretty tough spot as well. I definitely do not think that they would send her back to Bangladesh, where she would most likely be arrested. But India is certainly in a tough position. My sense is that they do not want her to stay there long term, because they have an interest in trying to make relations work with the interim government in Bangladesh and whatever government comes after that. But I think at the same time that it's not going to do anything that could make her uncomfortable and feel that she has to get out anytime soon.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Badiul. A question now, which I'll direct to Fahmida and Badiul from the chat or from the Q&A as well. is how the interim government should balance, I think, the twin issues of accountability and then the agenda moving forward. So whether it's with regard to criminal cases against individuals or whether it's against or related to the financial crimes, we saw during the 2007-2008 period that there was a tension at times between the two. How do you see those issues playing out? I don't know, Fahmida, if you want to go first on the issues related to financial accountability and anti-corruption, and then Badiul, you can talk maybe more broadly about the justice sector in general.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Yes, this is really a difficult task, in fact, because I have mentioned that the financial crimes have happened in different forms. I mean, domestically, we have seen that the evasion of tax is very high, but on the other hand, illicit financial flow is very, very high. As per the financial integrity reports, during the past few years, every year almost $8 billion have been gone out, mainly through trade misinvoicing. So that is, yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of a webinar.
Okay, so through trade misinvoicing, and also directly as well. So this is so Bangladesh. The new governor is now, and also the finance ministry. Both the institutions are working towards bringing back the finance and the money which has been taken out. But this is a very, very difficult and lengthy process. In the past, as you have mentioned, in fact, in 2008-9 also, during that caretaker government, that government tried, but only they were successful in bringing one particular person's money from Singapore, because this was the son of the previous government's prime minister, that leader of the opposition, Khaleda Zia's son. But in this case, there is a huge nexus. Everyone, not only through trade misinvoicing, but also directly, like bank loans have been taken out in various forms. So this will require many steps, I would say, but it is possible. But it is very, very lengthy and difficult process, I would say. But there is and also it depends on the duration and the tenure of the present government, because we are still not sure about the tenure of the government, how long it will stay. So depending on their tenure, the work plan will also have to be chopped out. So that's another issue where we are in the middle of some uncertainty right now.
Great, thank you. Badiul?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people were killed, hundreds and hundreds of people were killed, and families are aggrieved and angry. And also a lot of other crimes are committed against people. So they are the vengeance, there is a tendency to take vengeance and take law in their own hands, and some commit crimes in the process. But the way now things are moving is that hundreds of cases are being, or if not 100, dozens and dozens of cases are being filed against the, starting from Sheikh Hasina down to their even junior leaders all over the country. And many of these cases are filed by the aggrieved families, and some are by the police. And these cases have the same pattern as we used to have in the past, during the past regime. The fake cases, the few accused, few people who are accused, and then hundreds of who are unidentified miscreants. And so that gives an opportunity to implicate anybody later. And without much evidence. And this is, many people are concerned that these would not stick and they may not be able to punish the real culprits. And one of the demands of the people is that these people are punished. And so many people are concerned the way we are going is not going to lead to conviction of these people. So maybe what needs to happen is that they need to set up a legal cell, maybe 50 or 100 lawyers of different skills, some financial crimes, some the criminal acts, and some disappearance, and so these requires different kind of skills, and if they provide the legal assistance to the aggrieved families and those who want to pursue their grievances, and then they could frame the case in a way that will lead to conviction. I think that needs to happen, and happen quickly.
Great, thanks, Badiul. Given the
Sure.
richness of the discussion, I can already see that Right to Freedom may have to organize some subsequent programs focusing on some of these specific areas, because I think each of these topics could expand into a full webinar on its own. So this is a great kind of preview of things to come. Michael, switching to you and from your perspective in Washington and being plugged into the Washington foreign policy circles, there was some discussion of the misinformation and disinformation that's been coming out since August 5th. And obviously that has an impact on the Bangladesh-India relationship, as you mentioned. But what impact do you think it will have or is having in Washington as these conflicting views of the Bangladesh revolution and whether or not that's better for not just Bangladesh, but the region and the world? What's your sense of how this is all playing out in Washington?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's quite notable that soon after the interim government took office and after Dr. Yunus was sworn in, that you had a statement from the State Department essentially indicating that the U.S. Looks forward to working with the interim government. So I think things are right now in a pretty good place between the U.S. government and this new interim government. I really don't think, I mean, my sense is that U.S. officials did not at all buy into the misinformation, the disinformation, whatever you want to call it. I think that there's a pretty strong understanding that there was a lot of that, and that they were able to separate fact from fiction, so to speak. There has been some discussion about the recent call between Narendra Modi and Joe Biden, in which there were readouts that had a different accounting. And the U.S. version didn't mention Bangladesh, India's version did, and the Indian version, which mentioned Bangladesh, essentially suggested that the U.S. and India were taking the same position on issues of religious minorities. I think the wording from the Indian readout was something to the effect that both leaders expressed concerns about the plight of the Hindu community in Bangladesh, and clearly, India has taken a very different position in reality. We could get into the details about why the Indian readout came out that way, but my bottom line point here, and this is based on conversations I've had with U.S. officials since August 5th, is that people understand what the misinformation is, and they're not going to buy into it. There's a broader question, I think, about what recent developments in Bangladesh and India's response to what's happened in Bangladesh, what implications that could have for U.S.-India relations. We know that the U.S. and India have not really seen eye to eye on Bangladesh for quite some time. But I think now, at this point, all I would say on the question of misinformation is that I really don't think that you have many takers within the administration. And I think that also would apply on Capitol Hill as well, quite frankly.
Great, thanks, Michael. Unfortunately, I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to make this the last question, and then I'll hand it over to Bill to wrap it up. And this question for Badiul and Fahmida, Michael, when talking about international relations, noted or made the point that Professor Yunus can be this government's greatest asset. I'm looking more domestically in terms of the reform agenda. How do you think about the Yunus factor in this interim government, particularly since he's somebody who's quite accomplished, has written a lot, has a lot of his own ideas? How much going forward are we going to see Mohammed Yunus implementing some of his long-held ideas and aspirations? And how do you see Yunus trying to bring together these disparate forces that contributed to the change? So we'll start with Badiul and then to Fahmida.
Well, Professor Yunus is he's a rock star in the international scene, as we know, and also he's very popular, and he has commands the respect of most Bangladeshis. So he's our biggest asset. But so far, he has not really said much about the kind of reform they are going to undertake. And in fact, the last the address to the nation, he said that how long they will stay will depend on politics, on the political parties, of what I understood. But I think they would have to come up with their agenda too. And so we are waiting for him to spell out and how far they want to go. And so he has not really. And I'm pretty sure if he spells it out, and it will a lot of people will support it or help achieve those, implement those. And so we are still waiting for him to spell out and tell us how far they want to go.
Great. Fahmida, do you have anything you want to add on that topic?
No, I echo the what Dr. Badiul had just said, because the reform agenda is huge. There has to be political reform and also economic reform. But time is limited. How long a government interim government stay in power? That is the real question. So the reform will require. I would say that 5 decades of mess cannot be resolved in even 5 years. So if he has to pick up some of the important measures, I would say that election commission, anti-corruption commission, human rights commissions, judiciary systems, these are to be on the priority list. But following that, also in economic reforms, the banking sector or the broader financial sector, and also the taxation system, public expenditure for mega projects and all these, and also the civil bureaucracy. So the reform agenda is too long, but one doesn't really know that what is being planned by the interim government as of now. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Fahmida, and thanks again for jumping in just after getting off a long flight. I know how challenging that is, so thank you for joining us. So part of the role of moderator is to disappoint participants who ask questions and then don't have the opportunity to hear directly from the panelists. I apologize for that. The good news is that our 3 panelists are all prolific writers and are frequent guests on talk shows and webinars. So you'll see them again and can ask them questions. You can interact with them on social media. And I hope that they'll accept our invitations to return for the future programs. But I thank them all for their outstanding participation today. Bill, I will give it to you for the last word to send us on our way, and we'll wrap up today's session. Over to you.
Okay, you hear me? Good. Well, as another retired diplomat, I'm referring to something Michael said. Let me say that this has been a very rich conversation and a very good one. And extremely useful, I think, in lining up our own thoughts about how to go about doing what we should be doing in relation to the Bangladesh attempt to recover and to reform and to do what it's going to do to get back into the functions of real life. So I actually think, John, that you said very correctly that there are a whole lot of issues that have come up here, which we've only actually heard about slightly or hardly at all, and that we will have to do a lot more webinars or other kinds of events that cover these issues. So I'm very pleased on that because it gives us an agenda to think about ourselves. But otherwise, I want to say to the speakers and to everybody else that we're very, very pleased to have you. We hope you do come back. Let me echo what John said. And we hope to continue doing this for a long time. I hope, who knows how long. But in any way, thank you all for coming, and thank you and good luck as you go on your way.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Great. With that, we'll declare today's proceedings closed and look forward to the next opportunity to interact. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.